The airport was loud. The boy was not. He stood perfectly still among the rushing crowd, 3 years old, holding a torn boarding pass that wasn't his. When security brought him to Marcus Hale, the only name on the emergency contact card tucked inside the boy's coat, Marcus crouched down and offered his hand out of obligation. The boy took it without hesitation. Then looked up. Then said one word. And Marcus forgot, for a moment, how to breathe. Why did that feel like something he had lost? Before we begin, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Marcus Hale did not do airports the way other people did airports. He moved through them like a current, fast, deliberate, and untouchable. His assistant walked 2 steps behind him. His security stayed close but invisible. His phone had been on since 4 in the morning and would stay on until midnight. He had a board meeting in 3 hours and a company worth $11 billion that needed him sharp, composed, and completely unreachable to anything that wasn't already on his schedule. He was 44 years old. He had built everything he had from nothing. And he had learned, a long time ago, that the moment you let something unexpected slow you down, you lost. That was before the boy. The airport security officer stepped in front of him near the domestic arrivals gate. Polite, apologetic, but firm. "Mr. Hale. I'm sorry to stop you, sir. We have a situation." Marcus looked at the officer. Then past him. And he saw the child. The boy was small, no more than 3 years old, standing beside a second officer near the edge of the corridor. He wasn't crying. He wasn't looking around the way lost children do, searching for a familiar face in every stranger who passed. He was simply standing there, very still, holding a torn boarding pass in both hands like it was something important. The first officer held up a laminated card, small, the kind kept inside a coat pocket. "This was found on him, sir. It's an emergency contact card. The number listed is registered to you." Marcus took the card. He looked at the number. And something cold moved through him that he didn't have a name for yet. That number was not listed anywhere. It was not in any directory, any database, any public record. Fewer than 5 people in the world had it. His assistant. His lawyer. His doctor. His brother. And one other person, from a chapter of his life he had closed so carefully he sometimes convinced himself it had never been written. Where did he come from? Marcus asked. International arrivals. He was separated from his travel companion, a woman, we believe his nanny. She's being held in a secondary customs room. There were questions about her documents. Marcus looked at the card again. Then at the boy. The boy was looking back at him. Not the way children usually look at strangers, with that careful, uncertain sizing up that precedes either tears or curiosity. This was different. The boy looked at Marcus the way you look at someone you expected to see. Marcus walked over. He crouched down to the boy's level, his suit jacket pulling across his shoulders, his $10,000 shoes on the terminal floor, and he did the only thing that seemed reasonable. He offered his hand. The boy took it. No hesitation. No fear. And then, in a voice that was completely calm, the boy said one word. "Papa." Not a question. Not a guess. A fact. Stated simply, the way a child states something he has always known. Marcus went still. The word landed somewhere inside him and didn't move. He couldn't explain the feeling. He told himself immediately, rationally, that the boy was confused. Lost children attached to adults. Lost children sometimes reached for the nearest safe-looking person and called them something familiar. It was a trauma response. It was a coincidence. It was nothing. He stood up. He looked at the officer. "Has he said anything else?" "No, sir. Just that." Marcus looked back at the crowd, instinctively, scanning the faces of everyone moving past the gate. He didn't know what he was looking for. He stopped himself. He didn't know why he'd looked at all. The officer gestured toward the boy's coat, a small gray thing, slightly too large for him. He had some items on him. Boarding pass, a folded note, and a photograph. Marcus looked at the items. The photograph was face down. The note was folded in thirds. He picked up the note. He looked at it for a moment. Then, for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he put it back in the boy's pocket without opening it. Not yet. There was a pull to that note that he didn't trust. Like a door he wasn't ready to open in the middle of a corridor with fluorescent lights and security officers watching him. Whatever was written inside it was going to require him to be somewhere quieter than this. The boy stood beside him, still holding his hand. His assistant appeared at his elbow and said, quietly, "Sir. Your meeting? Push it." She blinked. In 4 years of working for Marcus Hale, she had never once heard him say those 2 words about a board meeting. He didn't explain. A third officer arrived and leaned toward the first, speaking low. Marcus caught the words, secondary holding, and keeps asking for him, and then his own name, spoken by someone he'd never met, in a room he hadn't known existed 10 minutes ago. Who is she? Marcus asked. The nanny. Her name is Elena Vasquez. She has valid identification, but there was a question about the child's travel documentation. The officer paused, she's been very insistent, sir. She's been asking for you by name since the moment we separated her from the boy. Not the boy's name. His. Marcus looked down at the child, who was now watching a luggage cart move across the terminal with the complete absorption that only 3-year-olds can give to a moving object. His small hand was still tucked inside Marcus's. It was warm. Heavier than it should have been. 10 minutes later, Elena Vasquez was brought into the private security office where Marcus was waiting. She was in her 50s, dark-haired, and had clearly been crying, not recently, but earlier, before she'd made a decision to stop. She walked in and looked at Marcus with an expression that wasn't surprise. It was relief. She recognized him. And that was the thing that made the floor feel slightly uncertain under his feet. Because he had never seen her before in his life. Before the officer could say a word, before Marcus could ask a single question, she looked straight at him and said, "She said you'd come. She said you always came when it mattered." The room was quiet. Marcus looked at this woman he had never met, who knew his name, who had his private number on a card in a child's coat, who was looking at him like he was the answer to a prayer she had been saying for a very long time. And he said the only thing he could say. "Who is she?" Elena Vasquez pressed her hands together. And did not answer. If this story already has you thinking, leave a comment below and tell us what you believe is happening. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're there when the next chapter drops. The truth is only getting harder to look away from. Elena Vasquez did not sit down when they offered her a chair. She stood near the wall of the small airport office with her arms crossed over her chest, not out of defiance, but the way a person stands when they are holding themselves together by sheer will. Her eyes were dry now. Whatever she had felt in that customs room, she had already decided she didn't have time for it anymore. Marcus watched her. He had built a career on reading people in the first 30 seconds. What he read in Elena was this: she was terrified, she was exhausted, and she was not going to tell him everything. Not yet. His name, Marcus said. Start with that. Elena looked at the boy, who was sitting on the floor near the door, still holding the torn boarding pass, examining it like it contained a secret. Then she looked back at Marcus. Eli, she said. His name is Eli. Last name? A pause so short most people would have missed it. Just Eli, for now. Marcus noted the pause. Filed it. And his mother? Elena's arms tightened across her chest. I was told not to say. By who? By her. The room was quiet for a moment. Marcus kept his voice even. Elena. There is a 3-year-old child who was just delivered to me at an airport using a phone number that does not exist in any public record. Somebody went to a great deal of effort to make sure he ended up with me specifically. I think you understand that I'm going to need more than a first name. Elena looked at him. Something moved across her face, not softness exactly, but recognition. Like she was measuring him against a description she'd been given a long time ago. Whatever she found, it seemed to settle something in her. Let your people run the number, she said quietly. You'll find what you need to find. Marcus's assistant, Claire, had the answer in 11 minutes. She handed him the phone without a word, which told him more than the words on the screen did. Claire had worked for him for 4 years. She handed him things without a word when she sensed that whatever was on the screen required privacy. The number on the emergency contact card traced to a prepaid phone, registered 4 years ago. The name on the registration was Nadia Voss. Marcus read the name once. Then he handed the phone back to Claire. He walked to the window of the office that looked out onto the terminal, the ordinary, moving, indifferent crowd of people going to ordinary places, and he stood there for a moment. Claire said nothing. She told him afterward that she had never seen him look like that. Not in 4 years. Not once. He didn't explain it. He didn't need to. Some names don't require explanation. Some names are whole rooms that a person has locked and learned to walk past without slowing down, and then one day someone pushes the door open, and all the light that was trapped inside comes out at once. Nadia Voss was that room. One memory, fast and uninvited, a hotel room, 4 years ago. Morning light. Her coat already on. A goodbye that was supposed to be temporary, the kind you make when you both believe there will be time to say the real thing later. He had watched her walk out. He had told himself he would call by the end of the week. He had not called. And then the weeks became something he didn't look at too closely. He turned away from the window. Is she alive? He asked Elena. Direct. No setup. Elena looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. She didn't answer. Which was its own kind of answer. Marcus felt something move through him, quiet and cold, the way grief moves when it arrives before you've confirmed there's anything to grieve. He didn't push. He had learned enough in his life to know that some silences need to be respected before they open. They put Elena in a car with one of his security team. Eli rode with Marcus. The boy climbed into the back seat with the ease of a child who is accustomed to being moved from place to place by adults he trusts only slightly. He settled against the seat. Looked out the window at the airport slipping away. Then, without any announcement, he leaned sideways against Marcus's arm. Within 4 minutes, he was asleep. His small hand had found Marcus's sleeve somewhere in those 4 minutes and closed around it. Not gripping. Just holding. The way a child holds on to something when they sleep, not because they're afraid, but because the body knows, even in sleep, what the mind is still working out. Marcus looked down at him. He thought about the word the boy had said at the airport. How certain it had sounded. How it had landed in him like something with weight. He told himself again, as he had been telling himself for the past hour, that it meant nothing. Children in distress reach for the nearest adult. Children in distress say things. He told himself this the way you tell yourself something you already suspect isn't true. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out the items from Eli's coat. The torn boarding pass. The folded note, which he still hadn't opened. And the photograph. He turned it over. The photograph was of a woman. But the top half, her face, had been torn away. Deliberately, it seemed. Carefully. Only her hands remained visible, and her wrists, and the edge of a light-colored dress. Marcus looked at it for a long moment. And then he saw the bracelet. On her left wrist. Gold, simple, with a single small clasp. He knew that clasp. He knew the weight of it, the way it sounded when it moved. He knew it because he had chosen it himself, from a small shop, during a business trip that was supposed to be forgettable. He had brought it back and given it away on the last night that everything between them was still whole. He had never seen it again after that. Until now. Until a photograph, face torn away, in the coat pocket of a sleeping child who had taken his hand at an airport and said one word like it was the simplest fact in the world. Marcus sat very still in the back of the car. Eli's hand tightened slightly on his sleeve, even in sleep. Holding on. And Marcus looked at the bracelet in the photograph and understood, for the first time, that the question was not as simple as he had thought. It was not who sent this child. The question, the real one, the one that had been waiting in that room with the locked door, was something much harder. What happened to her? If you felt something reading that, leave a comment below. What do you think happened to Nadia? Share your thoughts, and subscribe so you're there when the truth starts coming out. It only gets heavier from here. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat at his desk at 2 in the morning with Eli breathing quietly in the guest room down the hall, and he called Crane. Raymond Crane had worked for Marcus for 9 years. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer opinions. He found things. Nadia Voss, Marcus said. Everything. Now. I'll call you back. He called back in 4 hours. Marcus hadn't moved from the desk. She's not missing, Crane said. She's in St. Mercy Hospital. Lakeford. 3 hours from here. Car accident, 2 days ago. She's unconscious. They have her listed as critical, stable. Marcus said nothing for a moment. 2 days ago, he repeated. Yes. Eli had arrived yesterday. The math was immediate and awful. Nadia hadn't sent Eli to him after the accident. She had sent Eli before it. She had put a 3-year-old boy on a plane, with Elena, with a photograph and a folded note and a card with Marcus's private number, and then, sometime after that plane left the ground, she had gotten into a car. She had made a plan. She had arranged everything. She had decided that Eli needed to reach Marcus, and she had done it before she knew whether she would survive. Whatever she had been afraid of, it was worse than a car accident. Marcus stood up. Walked to the window. The city was dark and still below him, completely indifferent. There's something else, Crane said. Tell me. Nadia Voss stopped existing about 3 years ago. No activity on the name. No address, no accounts, no records. But there's a second name, Sarah Mellon. Leased an apartment, held a job, had a bank account. Everything quiet, everything clean. It's her, Marcus. Same photograph on file with the DMR. Same height, same date of birth. A second name. A second life. Built carefully, maintained quietly, for 3 years. Marcus pressed his hand flat against the cold glass of the window. She hadn't just disappeared. She had rebuilt. A woman who had made herself invisible didn't do that by accident. She did it because she was afraid of being found, or because she was protecting something from being found. And the only things she had, that anyone might want to find, were two, herself, and Eli. He thought about the bracelet in the photograph. The face torn away. The note he still hadn't opened. Who were you hiding from, Nadia? He was back at the desk when Elena appeared in the doorway just after 7, wrapped in a borrowed robe, her gray hair unbraided. She had been given a room. She hadn't been told she could leave. Marcus looked at her. Tell me how old he is. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, 3 years and 4 months. She said nothing else. She didn't offer anything softer, didn't cushion it, didn't look away. She just watched him. Marcus did the math. He had always been fast with numbers, it was one of the things that had made him what he was. His mind moved through the calculation before he had decided to let it. 3 years and 4 months. The last time he had seen Nadia. The hotel room. The morning light. The goodbye that wasn't supposed to be final. The numbers came out clean. He did not let his face change. He had learned to do that a long time ago, to absorb things without showing where they landed. His expression stayed steady, neutral, controlled. But his hand, resting on the desk, went completely still. Elena saw it. He knew she saw it. She turned and walked back down the hall without being dismissed, which told him she had said exactly what she came to say. He drove to Lakeford alone, against Claire's strong objection and Crane's louder one. He needed to see the place before anyone else could manage what he saw or how he saw it. St. Mercy was a mid-sized hospital in a city Marcus had no connection to. He walked in and found the nurse's station on Nadia's floor and identified himself. The attending physician would arrive in 20 minutes, they said. He could wait. He didn't wait at the nurse's station. He found Nadia's room and stood outside the door. Through the small window he could see the shape of her under the hospital blankets, the pale tube of an 4 line, the slow rise and fall of the monitor beside her. She was alive. That was the only thing he let himself confirm for a moment. Then he looked at the visitor log clipped to the outside of the door. Standard practice, a sheet of paper, dated entries, names. Marcus ran his finger down the list slowly. Most of the names meant nothing to him. A neighbor. A woman named Carla who visited twice. A name that appeared once, then again, and again. Weekly, for the past year. Richard Hale. Marcus stood very still in the hospital corridor. His brother's name, in his brother's handwriting, week after week after week. Richard had been coming to this hospital, to this room, while Eli was sleeping down the hall from Marcus's office and the whole world believed Nadia Voss had simply ceased to exist. Marcus pulled out his phone. He did not call Richard. He called Crane. I need everything on Richard's movements. Last 12 months. Quietly. He took a photograph of the visitor log. Then he put his phone away and went back to his car and sat with both hands on the wheel for a long moment before he could trust himself to drive. He had left Eli in Claire's care for the morning. When he got back, Claire met him at the door with a careful expression that Marcus had learned meant something happened and I didn't know how to stop it. He wandered into your office, she said. I'm sorry, he was so quiet, I didn't hear him until. Marcus walked past her to his office doorway. Eli was standing in the middle of the room, holding the large framed photograph that sat on the credenza behind Marcus's desk. It was an industry award photo, 8 years old, Marcus in a tux, shaking hands and grinning with the other men who'd been honored that night. Eli was studying it with the full, careful attention that 3-year-olds give to things they find important. He pointed at Marcus in the photo. That's my papa, he said, to no one in particular. A fact, stated simply, the same way he had said it at the airport. Marcus felt something move in his chest that he couldn't name. Then Eli moved his small finger sideways, to the man standing next to Marcus in the photograph. Tall. Dark hair going gray at the temples. Hand on Marcus's shoulder, laughing. Richard. Who's that man? Eli asked. The question was so plain. So innocent. So completely unaware of the weight it carried. Marcus looked at his brother's face in the photograph, Richard's hand on his shoulder, that easy, familiar laugh, and he had no answer. He walked to Eli and gently took the frame. Set it face down on the credenza. And picked the boy up instead, which Eli accepted without complaint, leaning his head against Marcus's shoulder like it was a place he had always known. Crane called at 4 in the afternoon. I have the birth certificate, he said. Official filing. Lakeford County. Marcus waited. Father line is blank. Listed as unknown. A pause. But someone wrote something in the margin. By hand. The ink is old, looks like it was written close to when the certificate was filed. Another pause. 2 letters, Marcus. Faint, but there. M and H. The line was silent. Marcus was looking at the window, at the city, at nothing, at everything that had been quietly happening for 3 years and 4 months while he had been moving through his life believing a door was closed. MH. His initials. Written by someone's hand on a document that the law said meant nothing. A whisper in the margin of an official page. A small, desperate act of truth from a woman who had been told to disappear, who had disappeared, but could not quite bring herself to erase him completely. He sat down. Eli was in the next room, drawing something with the colored pencils Claire had found. Through the open door Marcus could hear the soft, rhythmic scratch of pencil on paper. Ordinary. Peaceful. Completely unaware. 3 years and 4 months. 2 letters in a margin. And a brother whose name appeared in that visitor log like a secret that had been hiding in plain sight for an entire year. If this chapter hit you somewhere deep, leave a comment and tell us what you're thinking. What do you believe Richard knows? Subscribe and turn on notifications. The truth about what happened 4 years ago is only beginning to surface. Richard Hale didn't knock. That was the first thing. He had a key, had always had a key, because Marcus had never thought to ask for it back, and because for 44 years the idea of needing to lock a door against his own brother had never once occurred to him. He walked into the living room at 9 in the morning like he had been expected. Cashmere coat. Easy posture. The particular calm of a man who has already decided how a conversation is going to go. Marcus was standing at the window with a coffee he hadn't touched. "You already know," Marcus said. Not a question. Richard stopped. Looked at him. Then looked around the room, taking in the small gray coat draped over the arm of the sofa, the colored pencils on the coffee table, the child's cup sitting beside Marcus's. "I heard," Richard said carefully. "Yes. Before I called you?" A pause just long enough to mean something. "I have people who keep me informed. You know that." Marcus turned from the window. "Nobody knew he was coming. Not even me." Richard said nothing to that. He set his coat over the back of a chair and sat down like a man who intended to stay, which was itself a kind of answer. "I should have told you," Richard said. "I know that. I've been sitting with that for 2 years." He said it simply, without theater. And that was the thing about Richard, he had always been good at simplicity. At warmth delivered at exactly the right temperature. It was what made him an exceptional chairman. It was what made him, right now, very easy to believe. He told his version cleanly. 2 years ago, a charity event in Lakeford. He had seen a woman across the room and recognized her, not immediately, but then all at once the way recognition works. Nadia Voss. A name and a face from a chapter of Marcus's life that Richard had watched quietly damage his younger brother without ever being invited to help. He had approached her. They had talked. He had kept the contact afterward, he said, because he wanted to understand the situation before bringing it to Marcus. He didn't want to reopen something painful without knowing whether it needed to be reopened. "She told me Eli wasn't yours," Richard said. "Directly. She said it clearly." Marcus looked at him. "She said she had moved on. That she had made choices. That she wasn't looking for anything from the Hale family." Richard leaned forward slightly. "I believed her, Marcus. I had no reason not to. It was a good story. It had the texture of truth, specific enough to feel real, generous enough to feel honest." Richard had included the part about feeling guilty, which people who are lying sometimes omit because it feels like an unnecessary detail. Richard included it, which made the whole thing easier to swallow. Marcus wanted to believe him. He noticed that he wanted to believe him. He also noticed that wanting to believe something and it being true were not the same thing. But he held that thought quietly and said nothing yet. Eli appeared in the doorway. He had been in the kitchen with Claire, eating something that had left a faint orange streak near his mouth. He was wearing a blue sweater 2 sizes too large that Marcus's assistant had picked up that morning, and he was carrying a single colored pencil for reasons that were probably clear only to him. He stopped when he saw Richard. Richard turned. And something changed in his face, something that looked, to Marcus, like relief carefully dressed as warmth. "Hey there," Richard said, voice dropping to that gentle register adults use with small children. He crouched down to Eli's level, the way you do when you want to seem safe. "What's your name?" Eli looked at him. Not the way he had looked at Marcus at the airport, not with that instant, certain recognition. This was different. This was a child looking at an adult the way animals look at something they're not sure about yet. Still. Measuring. He didn't answer. Richard smiled and tried again. "That's a cool sweater." Eli took 1 step backward. Then another. Then he turned and walked across the room and stood next to Marcus, not holding his hand, not hiding behind him, just standing beside him. Choosing proximity the way children choose it, without words, without explanation. Richard stood back up. His smile stayed in place. But something behind his eyes shifted, just for a moment, before he smoothed it over. Marcus put his hand lightly on Eli's shoulder. Children, he thought, read rooms the way adults have forgotten how to. Richard left an hour later, with a handshake and a promise to talk more soon and the general warmth of a man who believed he had handled something well. Marcus walked him to the door. He watched the car pull away from the window. Then he went back to his desk and called Crane. "The lawyer," he said. "Nadia had a lawyer on retainer. Find them." Crane called back in 40 minutes. The attorney's name was Patricia Soule. Family law specialist. 12 years of practice, focused on paternity and custody cases. She had been retained by Nadia, under her second name, Sarah Mellon, for the past 14 months. When Crane reached her office, her assistant delivered a single, practiced sentence, clearly prepared in advance. "Ms. Soule has been instructed to speak only with Marcus Hale. Directly. Alone. In person. Not with his lawyers. Not with his assistant. Not with anyone in the Hale family. Only him." Marcus sat with that for a moment. Nadia had hired a family attorney 14 months ago. She had prepared something. She had specifically blocked everyone around him from knowing what it was. Including Richard. He heard Elena before he saw her. She was in the hallway outside the kitchen, and she didn't know he was close enough to hear. She was speaking quietly, not to anyone, not on a phone, just the low murmur of private words not meant to travel. Another language. Something with soft consonants and long vowels that Marcus didn't recognize. He stood in the corridor and listened to the sound of it, not the words. There was something in the rhythm of it that he understood anyway. Some sounds don't need translation. Some sounds are prayer in any language. He asked Claire to find out what was said. She came back that evening with a piece of paper and set it on his desk without comment, which was again the sign that she knew something significant was on it. "Forgive him for what he doesn't yet know." Marcus read it twice. Then set it face down on the desk. He wasn't sure who Elena was asking forgiveness for. He wasn't sure who the him was, Marcus, or Richard, or someone else entirely. And he wasn't sure whether it was a prayer for a man who was innocent or for one who was about to find out he wasn't. The courier arrived at 7:45 that evening. A sealed envelope. No letterhead. Handwritten address in a script Marcus didn't recognize, neat, careful, deliberate. Inside, one sealed document, thick, official. And a small folded note, separate, placed on top. The note was in a handwriting he did recognize. He had seen it once, years ago, on a card she had left on a hotel pillow the morning she thought he was still asleep. 4 words. "Don't let Richard tell you who this boy is." Marcus looked at the sealed document in his hands. His name was on the front in the same careful script. No explanation. No covering letter. Just the document, sealed, waiting. And Nadia's 4 words sitting on top of it like a warning she had placed there from a hospital bed 3 hours away, while she was unconscious, unable to say it herself, so she had made sure the paper said it for her. "Don't let Richard tell you." Marcus set the note down. He picked up the sealed document. He turned it over once in his hands. And then he opened it. If Nadia's 4 words just stopped your heart a little, you're not alone. Leave a comment telling us whether you trust Richard, and subscribe so you're there when Marcus finally reads what's inside that envelope. This story isn't done with you yet. Marcus opened the envelope alone. No assistant. No lawyer. No one standing nearby with a prepared reaction. Just him, at his desk, at 11 at night, with the sealed document that Nadia's attorney had sent and the sound of Eli breathing quietly down the hall. He broke the seal cleanly. Unfolded the paper. Read it once, top to bottom. Positive. Probability of paternity, 99.998%. He set the document on the desk. He looked at it for a long moment. And then something happened that he had not prepared for. The room felt different. Not smaller. Not larger. Just different, the way a room feels when a truth has just moved into it and started rearranging the furniture. He was Eli's father. He had suspected it. The math had told him. The 2 letters in the margin of the birth certificate had whispered it. But suspicion and confirmation are not the same country. You can suspect something your whole life and still not be ready for the moment it becomes real. His first feeling was rage. Clean, cold, complete. For years. For years of Eli's life, first steps, first words, first everything, that he had not been there for. That had happened in an apartment under a false name in a city 3 hours away while Marcus had been building quarterly reports and closing deals and telling himself that the chapter with Nadia Voss was closed. For years that someone had decided he didn't deserve. He sat with the rage for a moment. Let it be there. Then it moved, the way strong feelings move when there's nowhere to put them, and underneath it was something quieter and harder to look at. Grief. For the years. For the boy who had grown from nothing to 3 years old without ever knowing the man whose number was written on the card in his coat. For the version of himself that might have been different if he had known. And then, underneath the grief, something else. Something that surprised him enough that he stood up from the desk and walked to the window just to have somewhere to put his body while he felt it. It looked like joy. Small, frightened, uncertain, not the joy of a man who has won something, but the joy of a man who has found something he didn't know was missing. And it frightened him because he hadn't expected it. Because it didn't feel like anything he had been trained to feel. Because Eli was asleep down the hall and had been here for 2 days and had already started doing things, specific things, that had lodged themselves somewhere in Marcus without his permission. He folded the document carefully, put it back in the envelope, and went to find Elena. She was in the kitchen, the way she always seemed to be at odd hours, as if she had appointed herself the permanent guardian of whatever room needed guarding most. She looked up when he came in. She read his face immediately, the way she had been reading things about this situation long before he had arrived in it. He set the envelope on the table between them. She looked at it. Then she nodded. "I know," she said. "How long?" "Since before he could walk." Marcus sat down across from her. He should have had more questions. He had 30 more questions lined up behind that one. But something in Elena's expression, relieved, but carefully so, the way you look when something good has happened but the harder part is still coming, made him pause. "Is there anything else I should know?" he asked. "About the test. About the results." Elena looked at the envelope. Then at him. "Did the document say anything about the second test?" Marcus frowned. "What second test?" "In the document. Did it mention a second one?" "It's a standard paternity result. There's no second test." Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "All right," in a tone that was not quite agreement. She stood up and began rinsing a cup at the sink, her back to him, and Marcus looked at her and had the distinct feeling that he had just walked past something important without seeing it. He filed it. He would come back to it. He called Richard from the car the next morning on the way to Lakeford. He didn't announce it as a confrontation. He simply said, "I opened the document. I know the truth." There was a pause on the line. Not long. But calibrated. "Then you know what Nadia was afraid of," Richard said. His voice was measured. Steady. The voice of a man who had already decided what he was going to say before the phone rang. Marcus assumed he meant afraid of Marcus's reaction. Afraid of what a man like Marcus might do when confronted with a 4-year secret. He almost said so. Instead he said nothing and let Richard fill the silence. Richard didn't fill it. "We'll talk when you're back," Richard said. "This is a conversation for in person." He hung up before Marcus could respond. Marcus held the phone for a moment. "Then you know what Nadia was afraid of." He turned the sentence over. It felt like a door opened just slightly, just enough to see that there was a room behind it, and then closed again. St. Mercy was quieter in the morning. He found the floor. Found the room. She looked smaller than the photograph had suggested. Smaller than he remembered, though his memory was 4 years old and full of gaps. She was pale and still under the hospital blankets, her breathing slow and regular, alive, but somewhere unreachable, in the specific silence that unconsciousness creates. Marcus sat in the chair beside her bed. He didn't know why he started talking. He was not a man who talked to rooms. But the room was very quiet, and she was very still, and something needed to be said. "I found him," he said. "He's at the house. He's fine." He paused. "He's been drawing things all morning. Apparently Claire is now called the tall lady." He told her very seriously that he would call her by her actual name when he learned to say it properly. The monitor beeped softly. "He hasn't said it again," Marcus said. "Since the airport. Just that once." He looked at his hands. "I keep waiting for him to." He sat with her in the quiet for a while. The particular stillness of a hospital room in the morning, nurses moving past in the corridor, the low hum of machines, ordinary life happening around a person who has temporarily left it. He didn't say everything. He wasn't sure he could. But he stayed longer than he had planned to. The attending physician caught him in the hallway on his way out. She was direct and professional, the kind of doctor who gave you information the way it deserved to be given, straight, without softening it into something it wasn't. "Mr. Hale. There's something in Ms. Voss's file I think you should be aware of." She checked her tablet briefly. 3 months ago she had a private appointment. Off-site. But the referral is logged in her chart here. Marcus waited. "She saw a genetic counselor," the doctor said. "The reason listed in her chart is hereditary risk assessment. Paternal lineage." Marcus said nothing. "Not your lineage, Mr. Hale. The chart specifies the assessment was requested in relation to someone else in the Hale family." The corridor was very quiet. Marcus looked at the doctor. Then past her, at the door of Nadia's room. At the shape of her through the narrow window, still, and pale, and full of things she had been trying to say for a year before anyone was ready to hear them. Someone in the Hale family. Not him. Someone else. If that last line just changed everything you thought you understood, leave a comment below. What do you think Nadia discovered? Subscribe and turn on notifications. The truth in this story runs much deeper than any of us expected. The genetic counselor's name was Dr. Amara Osei, and she did not want to talk to Marcus Hale. She said so directly, standing in the doorway of her private practice office with her hand on the frame, professional and firm. Patient confidentiality. Legal obligation. She was sorry, but there was nothing she could share. Marcus looked at her calmly. Nadia Voss is unconscious in a hospital. She has a 3-year-old son whose health may depend on what you know. And I am his father. He paused. I'm not asking you to break your oath. I'm asking you to help me protect a child. Dr. Osei held his gaze for a long moment. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. She told him without softening it, because she was that kind of doctor, the kind who believed that people deserved the actual truth, not a cushion version of it. There was a hereditary condition in the Hale bloodline. A cardiac one. Not a death sentence, those were her exact words, but not something you ignored either. Manageable, if caught early. Screenable. Treatable with the right interventions from the right age. But without knowledge, without testing, without anyone even knowing to look, it became something else entirely. Something that appeared without warning. Something that didn't wait. Richard had been diagnosed privately, 12 years ago. The family had buried it. Marcus sat very still in the chair across from her desk. Who else in my family knows? I can only speak to what Ms. Voss told me, Dr. Osei said carefully. She came to me because someone had informed her of the condition. She wanted to know what it meant for her son. Whether Eli needed to be tested. What to look for. What questions to ask. Who told her? Dr. Osei folded her hands on the desk. She didn't give me a name. But she said she had been told recently. Within the past year. Marcus already knew the name. He had known it since she said within the past year. He had known it since the visitor log on Nadia's hospital door, week after week in his brother's handwriting. He had known it since Richard had sat in his living room and delivered a story that was almost believable. Richard had known Eli might need early screening. He had known for a year. He had visited Nadia, told her what she needed to know about the condition, and then said nothing to Marcus. He had made himself the manager of a situation that was never his to manage. He had decided, alone, in his own head, with his own logic, that Marcus would react badly. That Marcus would create chaos. That Marcus could not be trusted with the truth about his own son. Marcus drove back to the city without music, without calls, without anything except the road and the particular silence of a man who has just found out that someone he loved made a year of decisions that belonged to him. He had spent the whole drive to Lakeford suspecting Richard of something dark, something deliberate and calculated. The visitor log. The measured phone call. Then you know what Nadia was afraid of. He had built a version of Richard in his mind that was close to a villain. And now the truth was both better and worse than that. Richard wasn't sinister. He was something harder to be angry at, a man who genuinely believed he was protecting people. Who had looked at his younger brother and decided, without asking, that Marcus needed to be shielded from difficult information. Who had sat across from him that morning with his easy posture and his warm voice and offered a story that redirected everything, not out of cruelty, but out of the deep, unshakable conviction that he knew best. Which was its own kind of cruelty. The kind that comes with good intentions. The kind that removes your choices while smiling at you. Marcus gripped the wheel. He thought about Eli's birth certificate. The father line left blank. 2 letters in a margin. Nadia living under a second name in a city 3 hours away, seeing a genetic counselor quietly, preparing legal documents quietly, arranging everything quietly, because the people around her had created a world where quiet was the only option she had left. Eli was at the specialist's office by 2 that afternoon. Claire had taken him. Marcus met them there. The pediatric cardiac screening was routine-looking, a room with soft lighting and a technician who was clearly practiced at keeping small children calm. Eli sat on the examination table in a paper gown that was comically large for him and looked around the room with the alert, interested expression he brought to most things. The technician attached the sensors carefully, explaining each step in a gentle voice. Eli watched the machine beside him. The soft lines moving across the screen. The quiet sound it made, steady, rhythmic, unhurried. "Does it make music?" he asked. The technician smiled. "No, buddy. It doesn't make music." Eli considered this seriously. Then looked back at the screen. "It sounds like it's thinking," he said. The technician laughed softly. Claire looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at his son sitting on that table in a paper gown, completely unafraid, finding something interesting in a machine that was checking whether his heart was safe, and felt something move through him that he could not have named or explained. Results would take 24 hours. He sat in the waiting room and did not check his phone. He was still sitting there, an hour after Eli and Claire had left, when Richard called. Marcus looked at the name on the screen for a long moment. Then he sent it to voicemail. He wasn't ready for Richard's explanation yet. He knew what it would sound like, careful, logical, probably even partly true. Richard would explain his reasoning. He would make it make sense, the way Richard always made things make sense. And Marcus was afraid that if he heard it too soon, before the anger had settled into something he could hold steadily, he might say something that closed a door permanently. He didn't want to close doors. Not yet. He just wanted to sit with the truth for a moment. The real one, not the managed version. The truth that his brother had known for a year that Eli might need medical intervention. That Nadia had been living with that knowledge in a small apartment under a false name, seeing doctors quietly, making legal arrangements quietly. That an entire infrastructure of care and secrecy had been built around a child that Marcus had not known existed, and that the people inside that infrastructure had decided, collectively and separately, that Marcus Hale could not be trusted with the simplest thing. His own son's name. His own son's health. His own son. Crane called at 6. I went deeper on Nadia's background, he said. The last 4 years. I've been through her personal files, the ones stored under the Sarah Mellon accounts. And there's a second contact. Someone she was communicating with before Richard. Before the hospital visits, before the genetic counselor, before any of that. A pause. Someone told Nadia to disappear, Marcus. Before Richard ever entered the picture. Someone told her to leave, to take a new name, to stay invisible. And it wasn't Richard. Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. Who? Someone inside your company, Crane said. I have a name. But I need you to be somewhere private before I say it. The waiting room around Marcus was empty and quiet. Ordinary chairs. Ordinary light. The completely normal-looking interior of an afternoon that had just shifted under his feet again. I'm alone, Marcus said. Crane told him the name. If that last revelation just knocked the air out of you, you're exactly where this story wants you. Drop a comment with your theory, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because whoever is inside that company has been there the whole time. The name Crane gave him was not Richard. It was not anyone from Nadia's life. It was not anyone from the outside world who had stumbled into this story by accident. It was a name Marcus had known his entire life. A name that had been in every room he had ever grown up in, every boardroom he had ever entered, every decision the Hale family had ever made that mattered. Diane Hale. His mother. Marcus drove to her house without calling ahead. That was deliberate. Diane was 71 years old and had spent 5 decades making sure she was never caught without time to prepare. He was not giving her that time today. She lived in the original Hale estate, a house that was less a home than a statement. Marcus had grown up inside it and never quite felt that he lived there so much as existed within its expectations. He pulled up at the gate and didn't wait for the intercom. He had the code. He had always had the code. She was in the sitting room when he found her. Reading. Glasses on, posture perfect, a cup of tea beside her that was still steaming. She looked up when he walked in and her expression did not change. Not surprise. Not guilt. Something closer to the look of a woman who had been waiting, and had finally stopped waiting. I wondered when Crane would get there, she said. She set her book down. She did not stand up. She gestured to the chair across from her the way you gesture to someone you have invited, not someone who has arrived unannounced. Marcus did not sit. You paid for it, he said. All of it. The relocation. The second name. The legal protection. You built her a new life and told her to disappear into it. Yes, Diane said. No hesitation. No performance of regret. Just the word, plain and clean, delivered the way she delivered every difficult thing, as a fact that had already been processed and filed and made peace with long before it needed to be spoken aloud. Why? Marcus said. Diane folded her hands in her lap. Because a child, your child, a legitimate biological heir appearing without warning, would have fractured everything we spent 30 years building. The succession structure. The board agreements. The inheritance architecture that keeps this company from tearing itself apart the moment the wrong person applies pressure in the wrong place. She paused. I could not allow a complication of that size to arrive unmanaged. Marcus looked at his mother. She was a person, he said quietly. Nadia was a person. She was compensated generously. She was given safety, stability, and complete legal protection. She was not harmed. She was erased. Diane looked at him steadily. She was relocated. There is a difference. The room was very quiet. Outside, through the tall windows, the garden was perfectly maintained. Every hedge trimmed. Every edge defined. Everything exactly where Diane Hale had decided it should be. You weren't ready to be a father, she said. It came out simply, without cruelty, which made it land harder than cruelty would have. You were 40 years old and you were still building. You were not stable enough for what a child requires. I made a judgment. Marcus said nothing for a long time. He stood in his mother's sitting room and looked at the woman who had raised him, who had shaped everything he understood about power and strategy and the management of inconvenient truths, and he understood, for the first time, that she had not done any of this out of malice. She had done it out of certainty. The deep, unshakable certainty of a woman who had always believed that her judgment was simply correct. That the people she moved were better off moved. That the choices she removed were ones they couldn't have made properly anyway. She had looked at Nadia and seen a complication. She had looked at Eli and seen a variable. She had looked at Marcus and decided he wasn't ready. And she had acted accordingly. Cleanly, efficiently, and without asking a single one of them. We're done, Marcus said. He said it quietly. Diane opened her mouth. He turned and walked out before she could find the sentence she was reaching for. His phone buzzed in the car. The cardiac specialist's office. He answered immediately. The results were in. The doctor's voice was warm with the particular warmth that good news produces in people who are practiced at delivering both kinds. Eli did not carry the hereditary marker. His cardiac profile was completely normal. He was healthy. There was nothing to watch, nothing to screen for, nothing to fear. Marcus sat in the car outside his mother's house and pressed his hand flat against his eyes for a moment. The fear that had powered a year of Richard's decisions, the secret that had sent Richard to Nadia's hospital room week after week, that had built the whole architecture of managed silence and paternalistic protection, dissolved in a single sentence from a doctor. Eli was fine. Eli had always been going to be fine. And Diane had moved a woman across the country and erased her name and separated a father from his son for 3 years and 4 months over a succession plan. Marcus started the car. He went home. He found Eli in the living room, on his stomach on the floor, drawing something elaborate with the colored pencils. He had apparently decided that the coffee table was a more appropriate surface than the paper, a discovery Claire was dealing with diplomatically. Come on, Marcus said. Get your coat. Eli looked up. Assessed the situation with the seriousness he brought to most things. Where? Somewhere that isn't here. Eli accepted this as sufficient information and went to find his coat. They were out of the house in 6 minutes. Marcus left no note. Richard's missed calls were still sitting on his phone, unanswered, and he left them there. He was not ready for Richard's explanation yet, not for the careful, logical, partly true version of events that Richard would have prepared. He needed space first. He needed to be somewhere with Eli that was not inside the geography of everything his family had built and managed and arranged. He would deal with Richard. He would deal with all of it. Not today. The hospital called at 7 that evening. He almost didn't answer. He was watching Eli eat something messy at a diner table 2 towns away, completely content, narrating his drawing to no one in particular. Then he saw the number. St. Mercy. Lakeford. He answered. The nurse's voice was careful and warm. Mr. Hale. I'm calling because Ms. Voss regained consciousness approximately 40 minutes ago. A pause. She's been asking for you. Marcus stood up from the table. Eli looked at him. She's also been asking about a document, the nurse continued. She's been quite insistent. She says her lawyer was holding a second document, separate from the one that was couriered to you. She says it's important that you receive it before anyone else does. Another pause. She was very specific about that, Mr. Hale. Before anyone else. Marcus looked at Eli across the diner table, at his son, eating something with complete absorption, unaware that a woman 3 hours away had just opened her eyes and was already trying to protect him. A second document. One Marcus had never received. One Nadia had been holding separately from everything else. One she was already asking about, in the first hour of consciousness, before she had even asked for water. One that, from the sound of the nurse's careful voice, changed something significant. One that Diane did not know existed. Nadia is awake. And the first thing she did was reach for something that could change everything for Eli. Leave a comment telling us what you think she's been holding, and subscribe so you're there when Marcus walks into that hospital room and finally hears her voice. Marcus stood outside the door for a moment before he went in. Not long. Just enough to understand that whatever happened on the other side of it was going to be permanent. You can't unhear a voice you've spent 4 years not hearing. You can't unsee a person you've spent 4 years not looking for. He had driven 3 hours with Eli asleep in the back seat and Elena quiet in the front, and the whole drive he had been preparing himself for something, though he couldn't have said exactly what. He pushed the door open and went in. She was awake. That was the first thing. She was awake, and looking at the door when he entered, which meant she had been listening for footsteps. She had been waiting for him specifically. Her eyes found him immediately, the way eyes find something they have been searching for long enough that the search has become automatic. She looked smaller than he remembered. The hospital bed had something to do with it, and the foreline, and the careful stillness of someone whose body has recently been through something serious. But it was more than that. For years is long enough for a person to become, in your memory, slightly larger than life, slightly more certain, more defined, more everything, and then you walk into a room and find the real version, and the real version is just a person. Tired. Relieved. Human in a way that memory never quite captures. She was not afraid of him. That was the thing he noticed second, and it landed with unexpected force. He had not realized, until he saw its absence, that he had been bracing for fear. For the particular look of a person who has been hiding and has finally been found. Instead, what he saw was something closer to relief, the specific relief of someone who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time, and has finally, at the end of a very long road, been able to put it down. "You found him," she said. "Yes. Is he okay?" "He's in the hallway with Elena. He's fine." Marcus paused. "He told my assistant he would learn her name when he could pronounce it properly." Something moved across Nadia's face, something that was almost a smile, and grief at the same time. "That's him," she said quietly. "That's exactly him." Marcus sat in the chair beside the bed. Not across the room. Not in the doorway. Beside her, the way you sit when you have decided the distance is finished. "Tell me," he said. She did. She didn't dress it up. She didn't start from the beginning or build to it gradually. She told him the way people tell things when they have rehearsed the telling so many times in their own head that the performance has burned away and only the truth is left. Diane had come to her when Nadia was 4 months pregnant. She had framed it as a conversation, then as an offer, then, when Nadia didn't immediately agree, as something that was going to happen one way or another, and the only remaining question was how difficult Nadia wanted to make it. "Leave quietly," she said. Eli would be provided for, completely, anonymously, without any legal vulnerability. Or stay, and face a legal campaign that would run for years, that would cost everything Nadia had and more, and that would leave Eli in the middle of a fight that no child deserved to be inside. Nadia had looked at what Diane was offering and what Diane was threatening, and she had made the only calculation that felt survivable. She had chosen what she believed protected Eli. "I thought," she stopped. Started again. "I thought if I fought, I would lose. And if I lost, he'd grow up without either of us." Marcus looked at the wall for a moment. He thought about his mother in her sitting room, hands folded, explaining her logic. Her airtight, completely inhuman logic. He understood now what the weight of it had felt like from the other side. "She told you not to contact me," he said. "She told me that any contact would be considered a violation of the agreement and would trigger the legal process immediately." Nadia looked at her hands. "I believed her. I had no reason not to. I wrote you letters," she said. Marcus looked at her. "Once a month. Every month. For 4 years. She said it plainly, without asking for anything from him. "I never sent them. I was told not to, and I was afraid. But I kept them. I kept all of them." She paused. "There are 47 of them. In a box in my apartment. I didn't know what else to do with them. 47 letters. For years of things she had needed to say to someone who didn't know she was saying them. For years of words that had gone into a box instead of into the world, because a woman in a sitting room with a cup of tea had decided that was how it would be." Marcus said nothing. There was nothing to say that was equal to that image. He just sat with it. Let it be what it was. "Why did you send him now?" he asked finally. "Before the accident. Before you knew anything was going to happen." Nadia was quiet for a moment. "Because he asked me," she said. "About 3 weeks ago. We were in the kitchen and he just looked up at me and asked where his papa was." She looked at the window. "He asked it the way he asks everything. Just directly. Like it was a normal question." Her voice was steady, but only just. "And I started to answer. And I realized I didn't have an answer that was good enough." The room was quiet. "He deserved a real answer," she said. "And the only real answer was you." The second document was in a sealed folder that Patricia Soule had couriered to the hospital that morning, per Nadia's instruction the moment she was conscious enough to give instructions. Nadia handed it to Marcus herself. He opened it. "Read it slowly. Then read it again." It was a full legal recognition package. Meticulously prepared. 14 months of a family attorney's careful work, built around a single, specific request. Not money. Not property. Not any claim against the Hale estate or the company or anything Diane had spent 30 years arranging. One thing. She wanted Eli to carry the Hale name. Officially. Permanently. Regardless of what happened to her. Marcus held the document and could not speak for a long time. He was still holding it when he became aware of movement at the door. He looked up. Through the narrow window in the hospital room door, Eli was standing in the hallway with Elena, looking in. He had apparently been standing there for a while. He had that particular stillness that meant he had been watching and processing and had already reached some kind of conclusion. He didn't knock. Didn't call out. Just watched. Marcus watched him back, his son, in a hallway, seeing the two people who had made him standing in the same room for the first time. Eli looked at Marcus. Then at Nadia. Then at Marcus again. Then he turned to Elena and took her hand. They know each other, he said. Simple. Certain. Like a fact he had always suspected and had now confirmed. Marcus uncapped the pen. He found the signature line on the recognition document. He was halfway through his name when his phone buzzed against the bedside table. A notification from his legal team's secure system. Flagged urgent. He looked at it. The hospital's administrative records had triggered an alert. Someone had filed a competing guardianship claim on Eli. Not a letter. Not a threat. A formal legal filing, already processed, already entered into the system. Filed yesterday. Filed by a Hale family attorney. Diane had moved the moment Nadia woke up. While Marcus was driving to Lakeford, while Eli was eating at a diner table and drawing on napkins, while Nadia was asking a nurse for water and asking for him in the same breath, Diane had already been on the phone with a lawyer. Marcus looked at the filing on his screen. Then at the document in his hand, half-signed. Then at Nadia, who had read his face and understood, and whose expression had gone to the particular stillness of someone who has been afraid of exactly this moment for a very long time. He finished signing his name. 47 letters. Never sent. And Diane still isn't done. Leave a comment telling us what you think happens next, and subscribe so you're there for the final chapters. This story is almost at its truth. Marcus read the guardianship filing twice in the hospital corridor while Nadia watched him from the bed and said nothing. It was clean work. Precise. The kind of legal document that takes preparation, not hours, but weeks. Which meant Diane hadn't filed this the moment Nadia woke up. She had prepared it long before that. She had been holding it, the way you hold something you hope you won't need to use, but sharpen anyway. The argument was simple and deliberately brutal. Marcus Hale, unmarried, no prior parental history, currently under board scrutiny for a pending structural review. Unstable. Unproven. Unfit to make unilateral decisions about a child's welfare. She wasn't claiming Eli for herself. That was the careful part. She was claiming something more surgical, the right to determine who raised him. To appoint herself the person who decided. To turn Eli, once again, into something that got managed rather than loved. Marcus folded the document. Put it in his pocket. And walked back into Nadia's room. She filed, he said. Nadia closed her eyes for a moment. Then opened them. What are you going to do? His legal team called before he reached the parking lot. 3 lawyers, 1 conference line, a collective energy that Marcus recognized immediately as the energy of people preparing for a long and expensive fight. They had already drafted a response. They had already identified Diane's vulnerabilities. They were ready. Marcus listened for 90 seconds. Then he said, "Stop." Silence on the line. "Don't file anything," he said. "Don't respond. Don't acknowledge it. I'll call you back." He hung up and sat in the car and looked at the steering wheel. He could see it suddenly, the whole shape of it, the way you sometimes step back far enough to see a picture you've been standing too close to for too long. Diane's legal claim was not just a legal claim. It was an invitation. File here, fight here, spend the next 2 years here, on my schedule, in my framework, by my rules. Bring your lawyers. Bring your evidence. Bring your anger. Let's make this into something that takes so long and costs so much that by the time it's finished, Eli will be old enough to have formed his own opinions about what a battlefield childhood looks like. She had done it before. She had done it to Nadia 4 years ago, laid out a choice that wasn't really a choice, and watched a frightened young woman pick the option that Diane had already decided she would pick. She had been doing this her entire life. Moving people to terrain she had already chosen. Fighting battles where she had already placed the flags. Marcus was not going to fight on Diane's terrain. He drove home slowly. Eli was in the back seat with Elena, asleep again. He seemed to sleep in cars the way some children sleep anywhere, completely, without reservation, trusting the motion. His head was tipped sideways. His hand had found Marcus's sleeve again. Marcus drove and thought. He thought about Elena's prayer in the hallway, forgive him for what he doesn't yet know, and how it had felt like a verdict before he understood what he was being tried for. He thought about Nadia's 47 letters sitting in a box in a Lakeford apartment, addressed to him, never sent. He thought about Eli at the airport, standing perfectly still in the crowd, holding a torn boarding pass, saying one word with the certainty of someone stating a fact they had always known. He thought about Eli asking the nurse if the machine made music. He thought about Eli drawing on the coffee table and accepting correction with complete seriousness. He thought about Eli watching through the hospital room door, seeing Marcus and Nadia in the same room for the first time, and turning to Elena and saying they know each other with the calm of a child who had just confirmed something he had quietly suspected all along. And he understood something that should have been obvious from the beginning but had taken a week of lawyers and investigators and hospital corridors and his mother's airtight logic to become clear. The story was never about a secret. It was never about who Eli's father was, or who had known, or who had filed what with which attorney in which county. Those were the questions Diane had handed him. Those were the questions that kept everyone busy and billable and away from the only thing that actually mattered. A small boy had needed to belong somewhere. And every adult in his life, including Marcus, in his own way, by simply not being there, had made that impossible to arrange. He called his communications director at 9 that night. One photograph. The one Claire had taken without thinking about it, 3 days ago, in the back of the car after the airport, Eli asleep, head against the seat, hand closed around Marcus's sleeve. No faces visible except Eli's, peaceful and utterly unaware. The kind of photograph that doesn't argue for anything. It just shows you a child holding on. A brief statement to accompany it. 4 sentences. Not a press conference. Not a war. Not a detailed account of Diane's machinations or Richard's visits or 47 unsent letters. Just a fact, stated plainly, Marcus Hale had a son. His name was Eli. The legal recognition had been signed. That was all. He pressed send at 9:47. Diane's lawyers called at 10:53. Marcus's lawyer took the call. Summarized it afterward in 2 sentences, the guardianship claim was being withdrawn. They were citing a procedural error in the filing. There was no procedural error. They both knew it. Marcus knew it. Diane knew it. Power, it turned out, was sometimes just the decision to stop hiding, to simply say the true thing out loud in a space where enough people could hear it, and watch everything built on secrecy quietly fold. Marcus set his phone down. Looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then Richard called. He picked up. Said nothing. Let the silence ask the question. I saw the photo, Richard said. He sounded different. Not careful. Not measured. Something underneath the management, something that had been there all along under all the explaining and the visiting and the decisions made on everyone else's behalf. Are you angry? Richard asked. Marcus thought about it. Come and meet your nephew properly, he said. A long silence. Then, quietly, he has her hands. Marcus looked at his own hand resting on the desk. I know, he said. He did know. He had noticed it the first day, the particular way Eli held things, the way his fingers curved. He had noticed it and not let himself think about what it meant. He was letting himself think about it now. He drove to Lakeford the next morning with a box he'd had Crane collect from Nadia's apartment. 47 envelopes, bundled neatly, all of them sealed, all of them addressed in handwriting he recognized from the note she had sent with the DNA result. He set the box on the bed beside her. These belong to you, he said. I didn't open them. I won't. Whatever's in them is yours. Nadia looked at the box for a moment without touching it. You could have read them. I know. Why didn't you? He didn't have a clean answer for that. Something about the 47 letters felt like a private country, one she had built alone over 4 years, in the dark, without anyone to read what she wrote. They weren't his to enter without permission. Maybe they never would be. That was her choice, not his. He left her with the box and went to find Eli in the hallway with Elena. Nadia reached out and opened the first envelope. Her own handwriting. Her own voice, for years younger and very afraid, writing from the first month, when she had just made the choice she believed she had no choice but to make, when she was alone in a new city with a new name, when she had not yet learned to stop looking at her phone and hoping. She read what she had written when she was most afraid. And found that even then, even at the very beginning, before she had learned how to carry it, she had told the truth in every single word. Marcus chose to stop hiding. And the truth, stated plainly, turned out to be the only weapon that mattered. Leave a comment telling us what you think Nadia wrote in that first letter, and subscribe so you're there for the final chapter. This is almost the end. And the end is worth it. The paperwork was finished on a Tuesday morning. No ceremony. No audience. Just Marcus and his lawyer and a notary and a stack of documents that had taken 14 months of Nadia's quiet preparation and 1 week of Marcus's to complete. He signed where he was told to sign. The notary pressed her seal. His lawyer shook his hand. Eli Hale. Official. Permanent. Chosen. Marcus drove home and found Eli in the living room, on the floor with the colored pencils again, working on something that appeared to be a very serious architectural project. He sat down on the floor beside him, his suit jacket still on, which Eli found worth a brief glance before returning to the drawing. "Can I tell you something?" Marcus said. Eli kept drawing. "Yes. Your name is changing. Officially. Your last name is going to be Hale now. Same as mine." Eli stopped drawing. He looked at Marcus with the focused attention he gave to things that required processing. Marcus waited. He had learned, in 1 week, that Eli was not a child who responded to being rushed. "Does that mean I live here now?" Eli asked. "Yes." Eli looked around the room, at the high ceilings, at the window, at the colored pencils spread across the floor. He appeared to be conducting some kind of internal assessment. Marcus held very still. "Can I have a dog?" Eli said. Marcus looked at him for a moment. "We'll talk about it." Eli nodded seriously and went back to his drawing. Which Marcus understood, somehow, to mean yes. Nadia was discharged 4 days later. Marcus drove to pick her up. They didn't talk much on the drive, not because there was nothing to say, but because there was too much, and neither of them was ready to say all of it at once. For years is a long time. You can't cross it in a single conversation, or a single drive, or a single week of revelations. You cross it slowly, by choosing, every day, to keep crossing. She was not moving into his home. They had talked about it, briefly, carefully, the way you talk about something that matters too much to get wrong, and agreed that what they were building needed to start from something smaller and more honest than picking up where they had left off. That version of them was 4 years old. The new version was a week old. It needed space to figure out what it was before it decided what it was going to become. She found an apartment 20 minutes away. Close enough. For now, that was the right word for almost everything. Close enough. For now. Marcus helped her carry the box of letters inside. He set it on the kitchen counter without comment. She looked at it for a moment, then at him. "Thank you," she said. "For returning them." "They were yours," he said. "They were always yours." He left before it became something harder to leave. That was also the right choice. He was learning, slowly, which moments to stay in and which to let breathe. Diane's message came through her attorney, which was itself an answer to a question Marcus hadn't asked. She was making a donation. A significant one, to a children's cardiac health foundation, one of the best in the country, as it happened. The donation was to be made in Eli's name. Her attorney noted, carefully, that she hoped Marcus would accept it on Eli's behalf. Marcus read the message twice. Then he called Diane's attorney and said simply, "Accepted." No warmth. No anger. No speech. He had spent a week trying to find the right feeling to have about his mother, rage, grief, something that matched the size of what she had done. What he found, instead, was something quieter and more permanent. He understood who she was. He had always understood it. He had simply needed to see it applied to something he loved before he could stop expecting it to be different. He stopped expecting it. That was the thing he let go of. Not the relationship, that would take longer, and might never fully close, but the expectation. The hope that she would one day explain herself in a way that made it make sense. She had already explained herself. Her logic was airtight and completely inhuman, and it was simply who she was. He accepted the donation on Eli's behalf. He stopped waiting for an apology. Richard came on a Saturday. He called first, which was new. He arrived on time, which was also new. He was carrying a gift bag that was clearly too large, too expensive, and had been chosen by someone who had panicked in a store and grabbed the most impressive-looking thing they could find. Eli received it with great seriousness. He looked at the bag, then at Richard, then back at the bag. He reached inside and produced something large and complicated and clearly electronic. "Does it have batteries?" he asked. Richard blinked. Yes. I think so. I think they're included." Eli nodded once, with the expression of someone who has received satisfactory information, and went to find Elena to help him open it. Marcus looked at Richard. Richard looked at Marcus. And something in the room, some tension that had been sitting in the air for a week, that had been building since the visitor log and the phone call and all the careful, paternalistic management, loosened slightly. Not gone. Not forgiven. But loosened. The way things loosen when two people decide, without saying it, that the path forward matters more than the argument about how they got here. "He's good," Richard said. "He is," Marcus said. "She did a good job." He said it quietly, like it cost him something. "Nadia. She did a good job with him." "She did." Richard nodded slowly. That was all. It was enough. Nadia gave Marcus one letter. She brought it the following week when she came for dinner, the first dinner, low-key, the four of them plus Elena, Eli narrating the entire meal to no one in particular while the adults talked around him. After, when Eli was asleep on the sofa with his new electronic thing still clutched in one hand, she handed Marcus a single envelope. "This one you can read," she said. "If you want." He read it that night, after everyone had gone home, in the quiet of his office. It was from the first month. Her handwriting, younger somehow, more uncertain in the way handwriting is when the hand that holds the pen is not yet steady. She had written it when she was most afraid, when everything was new and wrong and she hadn't yet learned to live inside the choice she had made. "I don't know if you would have chosen this. I decided that you wouldn't. I've spent every day since wondering if I was wrong." Marcus read it once. Then again. Then he folded it carefully along its original creases and put it in his jacket pocket. Not to file away. Not to process later. Just to keep close for a while. She had wondered, every day, if she was wrong about him. He had spent 4 years not knowing there was anything to be right or wrong about. They were both starting from there. That was the honest beginning. The park was Eli's idea. He announced it at breakfast the next Saturday with the same energy he brought to most announcements, total certainty, no preamble. He wanted to go to the park. The wide one. With the thing you could climb. They went. It was loud with ordinary life, other children, a dog that Eli tracked with visible longing, someone flying a kite badly in the distance. Marcus walked. Eli ran, the way small children run when they have been given enough space, not away from anything, just forward, because forward is where things are. And then Eli stopped. He turned around. Found Marcus with his eyes across the distance between them. He wasn't scared. Wasn't uncertain. He just stood there, waiting, with the patience of someone who has learned that the person behind him will always catch up. Like it had always been going to be this way. Like the airport, and the car, and the week of revelations, and all of it, was simply the long route to a place he had always known they would end up. Marcus walked toward him. He didn't know, at the airport, why one small word from a stranger's child had landed like a key finding a lock. He knew now. Some things don't need explanation. They only need time. This story is one we'll carry for a long time. If it moved you, if any part of it felt true, leave a comment and tell us which moment stayed with you most. Thank you for watching, and subscribe so you're here for the next story we tell.